be live now.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Andrea Gillespie, your host of the Housing for All webinar series, which is produced by Dallas Housing Coalition. I serve as Senior Manager of Charles Schwab Bank and as a board member of the Dallas Housing Coalition. Thank you so much for joining us this morning after a week hiatus. On each episode of the Housing for All webinar series, we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone, by having impactful conversations with members of the Dallas Housing Coalition and other community leaders who are Dallas's strongest advocates for keeping the city affordable. Joining us this morning is Rhonda Boston. Rhonda is a high school counselor at Lake Highlands High School. She has over 15 years of experience as a teacher and a counselor, sharing her incredible insights with today's youth. Education and housing are uniquely entwined, and Rhonda, as well as students and families she serves, are among those who are most directly affected. Hello, Rhonda. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited about this conversation this morning because if I have learned anything from hosting this webinar over the last couple of months, it has been that housing touches almost every aspect of our community and social development, and education is definitely one of them. So I'm excited to hear a lot of your insights about this issue and the intersection between education and housing.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's just get right into it. You have over 15 years of experience in the education system, and I'm wondering if you can share what is the impact of housing stability on students' educational outcomes?
I just got back from a conference in Houston earlier this summer and it was over homeless teens. And it's something that you don't really think about, that, kids are homeless and trying to go to school. But when a student has instability, whether it's food instability or housing instability, learning isn't in the forefront of their minds. They're in survival mode. And it's not really a place that anybody should live in, let alone a child, trying to figure out what's going to happen when they come home. Are their clothes, if it's a family facing eviction, are their belongings going to be outside when they get home? Will they have anything? Where will they go next? It's just, there are the gaps from moving from one home in school to another school. Sometimes the records don't transfer. The learning gaps appear, especially in subjects like math. If you've missed a lot of school because maybe your parent doesn't have childcare, and again, your housing is unstable, then you may be the person that has to stay home and take care of the child. And all of that goes together with stable and affordable housing.
Yeah, I can imagine how difficult it would be to perform well in school when you don't know where you're living from one week to the next, when you're coming home from school and you're finding that you have to move all of a sudden. So yeah, I can definitely tell that instability would definitely affect how children and young adults learn. Can you share some specific examples from what you've seen about how housing has directly impacted your students and families?
Yes. So we have our school it's a unique mixture of students. We have students who live in lower income apartments. We have students who live in pay by the week motels. We have students who live in $1 million homes. So it's a wide variety. But what's impactful is, especially when COVID hit, I'm thinking about a family that, both of the parents worked, but when COVID hit and one of the parents got sick, they lost their housing. And the only way that we found out was that the student was doing the virtual learning, and the teacher noticed that the child had been absent from classes. And this was a good student, a 4.0 GPA, really smart, really on track, to go to college with a full scholarship. Teacher noticed he was missing. reached out to the family. Turns out the family lost housing because of the lost job. We, through various networks, we were able to help get them into transitional living. And that's what was able to get them back afloat. But for every family that there's like that, there are the ones that we don't know about or that we don't have the resources to help. And so those kids either end up, when their parents lose housing, they either end up living with friends, living with relatives. We had one student that told us that he spent the night at a laundromat because he didn't have anywhere to go. So it's really tough. It's really tough. And like I said, a lot of them, when they live in those pay by the week motels, it's easy because you don't have to put a deposit or anything. But the trap is you never really save enough money to have a deposit to get stable housing. So it's just a cycle that it's difficult to break, if not impossible.
Yeah, those are really some heartbreaking examples, especially the student that had to sleep in the laundromat. Yeah, I can't imagine being that young and having to be in that kind of, situation just as your life is beginning. And I would think that there's probably a lot of shame and fear about students and families sharing their housing situation, how precarious it is. So I can't help but think you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely, because it's, sometimes when families come into our where our school is located, like I said, there are a lot of apartments that cater towards lower income families. So I get a chance to meet with the family when they come in to enroll, but it depends on how open the family is going to be about their situation. There's a federal act called the McKinney-Vento Act, which has things in place for homeless students. But sometimes these kids aren't homeless, they just are poor and their housing is unstable. But again, if the family doesn't share, or if a student doesn't feel comfortable sharing with the teacher, who then the teacher comes and tells one of the counselors, we don't know. And so we can't help.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of the real lack we're seeing in affordable housing on enrollment and retention rates? I know I've been seeing a lot of press about just how COVID itself has impacted enrollment and student rates, but can you talk about how housing fits in that mix as well?
Yes, so I'll give you an example. So if I were going to move to a different place, a different apartment, I have everything all planned out. I'm vetting the movers. I'm making sure that they have good ratings. I have the luxury of trying to figure out where I'm going to go. With a family that doesn't have those resources, they get to be in a pinch. And so what happens is you kind of take whatever. And if you have an apartment that, let's say the apartment complex 2 buildings down offers a special where rent is $150 less, that family's going to move. Or
Hmm.
even if it's, maybe a mile away, which is now out of our, let's say it's out of our school district, because we are close to Conrad, which is in DISD. And so we get a lot of kids that flip flop back and forth between the two high schools. And a lot of it is because of those types of specials. Either the special is, okay, the rent went down just enough to where, hey, this is going to save us $150 a month, or the rent went up $150 a month, and now we have to move because we can't squeeze anything else out. So
Hmm.
again, that when that pricing goes up, it just creates more instability.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can only imagine that, and I think moving for anyone is difficult. I've moved many times in my life. It's very stressful. It pulls you from a lot of different other aspects of your life. So I can only imagine just like doing those moves to save on income, which when you're living very close paycheck to paycheck is very important. Like, but what that can do. Every time you have to pack up, get a mover, all that stuff, get people to help you. And then you have to re-enroll in a different school. Like, I can imagine how difficult it's doing. I can see a parent being like, well, it's March, we'll just pick up in the fall or something like that.
Yeah, because we've had a lot of kids that we ask them, okay, well, what school did you go? What was your last school? And they say, oh, I wasn't in school. Okay, well, when was the last time you were in school? And this has been prevalent since COVID. Oh, well, I was in school like a year ago. So, and that goes back to the educational outcomes. If you've missed a year of school, how do you catch up?
Yeah.
Especially when, there are 5-star tests that kids have to take to be able to graduate from high school. And how do you make that up if you've been at home?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And kind of staying along those same lines, but looking at students who have housing issues but are able to stay enrolled and go somewhere. How does that affect like extracurriculars that they can do, sports, or even college preparation? Can they manage all those
Yeah,
things?
it's difficult, but the kids that are motivated to succeed, they're going to succeed. But again, they're outliers. It has an impact on that, especially with the instability. Think about it, Andrea. If you were a cheerleader, best cheerleader in the Metroplex, but if you came to our school in November, you can't join a cheer team. Cheer team's already established. They've already had tryouts, so you've lost that. Or, with the sport, it would be our sports, we take kids, depending on how they do. But again, a lot of the things are established. So those kids miss out because they're coming in as a new student. We have an amazing PTA at our school that helps out with a lot of things. And I know that, we're fortunate that, they'll help out with, certain kids if they see, needs and they have the ability to do it. But a lot of students don't have those resources, and a lot of schools don't have those resources. But it's
Yeah.
hard to get plugged in when you're moving from place to place to place, especially if you're poor and you're moving from place to place to place, because again, you're in survival mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And staying along those lines, I'm curious, way back when, one of my first jobs out of school, maybe second, anyway, doesn't matter, it's been a while, was focused on youth development in transitions from secondary school to work, higher education, or life. And I'm just curious for the older students that you see that are rising juniors or seniors, or graduating seniors that are dealing with housing issues, like how well are they able to transition into higher education or life?
I don't have data on that, but my
Yeah, from what
my
you
my biggest concern with that is that, yeah, we prepare the students, but if they're in a family that says, okay, you're 18, you have to go, and that's the mindset of some parents, then what? Again, you could be the smartest student in the world, but if you don't have housing stability, your first thought is going to be, I need a job. And it's not going to be, oh, I need to go to school. No, you're going to do whatever it takes to make ends meet.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Unless they have a good counselor like you that's saying, "Wait a second,
But
let's think this
I wish
through."
that there was something that, like if there were I mean, how we have senior apartments, 55 and up. I
Yeah,
wish that there was some sort of model for young adults to where they could go and live without, trying to, because if you're 18 now and you're just out on your own and average rent is $1,500 a month, well, you're probably not making 3 times the rent, which is what a lot of complexes are asking you to bring to the table. So it's just, how do you ever get ahead?
yeah. Well, and I can imagine, how do you even get a landlord to trust you if you have no credit,
Exactly.
no rental history? Yeah, those are insurmountable odds. Switching gears a second, I'd love to talk more about you. And as an educator, how has the affordability of housing, affected you and where you work, what district you work in, how you've taken your career. Curious about that.
Yeah. So this is actually my 25th year in education, and the last 10 have been with Richardson ISD. Um, it's interesting because I believe at one point I could have purchased a house, but I never did because I always thought in the back of my mind, okay, yeah, I can afford my mortgage, but what happens if the air conditioning goes out and I
Mm-hmm.
need to replace it? It's not like I make enough money to where I wouldn't have to, finance a new air conditioning unit. And then what if I have a plumbing issue, or what if I have a roofing issue? I always thought that me being by myself, it just didn't make sense because I would be afraid to put myself in the hole. Yeah, I could have gotten equity by purchasing a house, but then like what happens when I don't have that cushion? Because my biggest thought, just how I grew up, is I need safety and security.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't feel that being a homeowner on a limited income.
Mm-hmm.
Now, things have changed as I've become a counselor. I make more than I did as a teacher, but really, if you look at the trajectory of a teacher's salary from beginning to end, there's not a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
In our district, I will say this: the school board did approve raises for teachers who have been in education longer to kind of close that gap, because at one point the starting salary, let's say, was $60,000, and then at year 25 maybe you made $10,000 more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what I mean, it's just difficult. And
Yeah.
if I were, when I started in education, I made enough money to where, I could still do what I want to do. Things weren't expensive. But now, I mean, I could say my rent has gone up for the same apartment that I moved into 5 years ago. The rent's gone up $500 a month.
Mm-hmm.
My salary hasn't kept up with that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
hard. It's hard. And I see why there is a decrease of people going into education, because it's just, with the economy, it's just not a sustainable field. I mean, and there's this crazy quote, oh, when you go into education, you don't do it for the income, you do it for the outcome. But when I get ready to pay my electric bill, they don't ask me anything about outcome. They're just like, hey, where's my money? And so you have to make a choice. And I love what I do, and I can't imagine doing anything else, but it's hard. It's a hard choice, especially, like I said, for young people now thinking about going into education.
Yeah, you bring up some excellent points. As a person trained in social work, a lot of what you say I feel in the in the depths of my soul. And especially when it comes to home ownership, I mean, you hit on some important points. It's not just the mortgage that you have to think about. You have to think about maintenance. In many parts of Dallas, property taxes have gone up astronomically, so that you have to take in consideration. Oh, so yeah, it's not just the monthly mortgage that you're paying. It's all the additional expenses that come with it, and yeah, you have to take that into consideration. And yeah, I think it's definitely a cost benefit analysis when people are thinking about, going into what I call like the human capital development field, social work, education, counseling, therapy, things of that nature. Is that, yeah, you have to really love it, because the economic payoff is not necessarily going to be there over the long term, and can definitely affect the types of choices you make about how to live your life and where to live, especially housing. Just as we start to round out our conversation, as an educator, um, what changes would you like to see in policy, specifically housing policy, that could benefit the students and families that you're seeing that are in these very precarious housing situations of facing eviction, moving at a moment's notice, uprooting their lives to save on rent. How would you like to see policy change to support those families?
I would love it if there was more transitional housing, right? Because like I said, there's that gap of, okay, I live in a extended suites or whichever hotel, but I'd like to move into an apartment. Where's my cushion? How can you help me move from there to an apartment to possibly a home? Or if there are apartments being built, I love the idea that a certain allocation should go to affordable units, but I think that also should be a sliding scale because you could be in a window where you just miss out because you make a little bit too much money. And then what? You still need help. I'm thinking about when I was in college and I put myself through college, and the first year they told me I made $900 too much. And so there was no money for me. I mean, I had to just keep working. I worked at night, I worked in the summertime. At one point I had three jobs. And so there needs to be steps, there need to be things in place. I would love to see that rent caps, or the increases in rent, there's no cap on it. Landlords can do whatever they want. They can increase your rent by two, three, $500 your next lease, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because before, I think the idea was, okay, let's keep it kind of stable, people won't move, moving the hassle. Now it's like, okay, well, if you move out, somebody else will move in and we can charge you more. So affordable housing in all the new apartment units for sure, but not, like I said, just geared toward lower incomes. In affordable housing in different ranges, transitional housing, maybe for young people, for families, just so you can move up in a cycle.
Yeah, those are some great examples. Especially, I'm thinking back towards your earlier comment about we have housing for 55 plus, but what about youth that are 18 to 24 that just need some support as they transition from secondary education to work, college, and life? I think that's a very fascinating concept, and I know would be greatly needed, even for families that are more middle income but still don't have the financial cushion they need to pay for college, things of that nature. Um, and yeah, you brought up the example of, which I have definitely seen through my work, is families that make too much for a rental subsidy, but not enough to afford market rent. And there are a lot of families that are in that situation where they're doing all the right things. They have a full-time job, steady income, and yet they find themselves in what I like to call no man's land, where they're they're doing all the right things, but it's still kind of working against them when they're trying to find good market rate housing. So this concept of helping those middle income working families is a very important point that you hit on as well. And just this concept of transitional housing for people who do find their lives in flux and are working. They're not necessarily homeless, but they still are challenged from month to month or year to year to ensure that their housing um, can fit in with their existing income. We love to end this webinar with calls to action or lasting thoughts that you would like to share with our viewers that are with us today. And do you have any of those to share? Any lasting reflections or a call to action that you would like to leave with us?
Yes, I would say to get involved in local politics, find out what's going on in your school district, find out what's going on in your city, in your neighborhood, stay connected, be a part of somebody's village. Even if you don't like kids, I mean, everybody doesn't have to like kids, I get it. But
Mhm.
find an elementary school, maybe in a lower income neighborhood. Go to that school, ask if they need anything. The teachers might need supplies. The teachers might appreciate some donuts. I mean, just pour into your schools. it could be you could sponsor a couple of kids. It could be, hey, you know what? Maybe this kid needs a prom dress, or, hey, I like to meet with the band director. I'd like to donate some money for a kid who might not have enough money for a uniform or the banquet, or, just anything. I mean, there's just so many ways to connect to where you can be a part of change and make a difference in somebody's life. Just think about what you can do to leave the world better than what you found it.
Thank you, Rhonda. I can't end this conversation in a better way. Thank you so much for that. And also for just sharing your unique perspectives on the intersection between housing and education, and what you're seeing as a counselor and an educator. We wish you much success throughout the rest of 2024.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And before we sign off today, I want to remind everyone with us to follow Dallas Housing Coalition on all of its socials for updates on how you can get involved in the work of the coalition and stay connected with future episodes of our Housing for All webinar series. While you're at it, make sure you go to the coalition's website at dallashousingcoalition.com to learn more about all of our member organizations and the work the coalition is doing. You can also go ahead and become a member at the website if you aren't already joining us. And finally, if you're interested in showing your support for Forward Dallas, an updated plan on how the city uses its land, please visit Dallas Coalition social media posts for a few suggestions on how you can weigh in and voice your support. Thank you to our viewers for joining us for another installment of our Housing for All webinar series, where we discuss whether Dallas is big and if it is truly big enough for everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.